My parents left me in foster care at 12 to travel with my sister. Now they're jobless, drowning in debt and reaching out. So I gave them exactly what they deserved. Subscribe so you don't miss what's next. I thought we were a normal family, second-hand toys. Occasional hugs, and dinners where my sister got all the praise. Then one afternoon, they sat me down and said they couldn't afford me anymore. That same night, they packed a suitcase and drove me to a foster home without a tear. I remember gripping my backpack so tight my fingers hurt. They waved from the car like I was heading to summer camp. At the Miller's house, I kept checking the window, waiting for my parents to come back. Every night, I counted the days like a sentence, but they never called. Instead, Emma sent a birthday card that said, "Wish you were here," with a photo of her on a roller coaster. I stared at it until the edges curled. The Millers noticed. Margaret hugged me quietly. No questions asked. That night, I stopped expecting a rescue. I stumbled on their travel blog when I was 16, posts dated just weeks after they abandoned me. There they were, Laura sipping cocktails, Greg parasailing, Emma holding a sloth. The captions bragged about family adventures. My stomach twisted. Margaret saw my face and sat beside me. "You deserve better," she said. I nodded, but I couldn't breathe. My parents hadn't been poor. They'd been prioritizing paradise over parenthood. That truth uncoiled like a slap. They didn't just vanish, they erased me. Emma's social media bios read only child. A family Christmas card surfaced online, 3 people. No mention of me. I printed it and stared. Was I a ghost? Ryan, my best friend, saw it and punched the locker. "You're not crazy," he said. But I felt erased. My last name matched theirs, but everything else was rewritten. I started documenting every lie. If they'd rewrite my story, I'd write back. One night, I called their number just to hear the voicemail. It had Laura's chipper voice. "We're out making memories." I dropped the phone. Thomas found me sitting on the kitchen floor. "You're not alone, son." I wasn't his by blood, but he never made me feel like a placeholder. That call made it clear they weren't coming back, not even for closure. It wasn't an accident. They'd replace me and never looked over their shoulder. I applied for college using scholarships and part-time jobs. My birth parents didn't list me on taxes, didn't sign FAFSA forms. But Karen, my dad's sister, reached out quietly. "They told the family you went to military school," she said. My hands clenched. They'd not only abandoned me, they'd rewritten my origin. Karen offered old photos, proof I existed. That red herring military school became fuel. If they wanted me invisible, I'd become unforgettable. I'd rebuild with my name intact. Emma messaged me first time in years. "Hey stranger, mom says hi." No apology, just emojis. I didn't respond. I showed it to Margaret, who said, "That's not a bridge, it's bait." I realized then they weren't reaching out from guilt, but curiosity. Were they testing if I still hurt, if I'd chase them? I blocked the number and wrote my scholarship essay on resilience. My story wouldn't begin with abandonment, it would begin after. Graduation day arrived. My name echoed through the auditorium, and as I crossed the stage, I spotted them, Laura and Greg, sitting in the back row, smiling like proud parents. My knees locked. Emma clapped beside them. I felt sick. They had no right to this moment. Afterward, they approached me like nothing had happened. "We're so proud of you," Greg said. I didn't respond. Margaret and Thomas flanked me like shields. This wasn't theirs. At the after party, they cornered me near the punch table. Laura handed me a card with a check inside, $500, a token, she said. I stared at the paper. "Blood money, you can't buy me back," I said. Emma scoffed. "It's not that deep," but it was. My life had been rewired by their absence. I ripped the check in half and dropped it between them. Thomas clapped once loud, deliberate. I wasn't theirs anymore. Later that night, Emma posted a photo of us as kids, with the caption, "Family always finds its way back." My jaw clenched. The comments flooded, "and so happy you're reunited. Blood is thicker." I felt erased again. Ryan saw it, and called her out publicly. "You abandoned him." She deleted the post, but the damage was done. They weren't just rewriting history privately, they were curating it online. I decided to share my version, no filters. I uploaded a blog post titled "The Sun They Left." No names, just truth. I detailed the day they drove away. The silence that followed, the Miller's kindness. Within hours, it spread, shared by classmates, picked up by local forums. People reached out, some from foster care, others estranged too. The response was electric. I wasn't alone. My story resonated because it wasn't just mine. It was a mirror for those discarded. I'd finally been heard. Greg emailed me. "Take it down. You're hurting the family's reputation." No mention of her cause, just optics. I replied with one sentence, "Truth doesn't bruise, it reveals." Margaret beamed when I told her. "Proud doesn't begin to cover it," she said. That night, I printed the email and pinned it to my bedroom wall. Their silence was their confession. The more they protested, the more they proved my point. I wasn't seeking revenge, just reclamation. A reporter reached out after reading my blog. She wanted to feature foster success stories. I hesitated, then said yes. During the interview, I kept it about growth, not spite, but I showed a childhood drawing a stick figure boy waving goodbye to a car. Her eyes welled up. "That's all people need to see," she said. The article ran with that image. It wasn't a takedown, it was a spotlight. I wasn't erased anymore, I mattered. The article went viral. Classmates messaged apologies. One girl wrote, "I thought your parents were dead." Nope, just disinterested. A local charity offered me a mentorship slot. Emma sent a single emoji, eyes wide open. Greg emailed again. "We're being harassed." I ignored it. They weren't the victims. For once, the world saw clearly. And I wasn't just surviving, I was being celebrated. I printed the article, framed it, and gave it to the Millers. My real family. Karen sent me an envelope marked private. Inside were photocopies of legal documents Laura and Greg had filed for tax credits, claiming me years after I'd been in foster care. Fraud. I felt my chest tighten. This wasn't just emotional abandonment. It was criminal. I scanned the papers, highlighted the dates. They'd use me as a write-off while ignoring every birthday, every call. I emailed the documents to a lawyer. This wasn't over. They owed me. The lawyer confirmed it fraud, plain and simple. We filed a formal complaint with theirs. The penalty could be steep. "Are you ready for backlash?" he asked. I nodded. I wasn't scared anymore. Ryan and the Millers stood behind me. This was about principle, not revenge. When the letter went out to Greg's accounting firm, he lost a major client. Actions have echoes. They used my name for gain. Now it was costing them everything. Emma called me in tears. "They're going to lose the house," she said. I paused. "You mean the house they bought after ditching me?" She sobbed. I didn't know, maybe she didn't, but I had for years. I offered no comfort, just silence. She hung up. Margaret overheard and said, "Compassion doesn't mean contact." I nodded. I'd drawn a line. Letting go wasn't cruelty, it was clarity. I wasn't their fix-it boy. Not anymore. Online backlash snowballed. People shared my blog with hashtags like Forgotten Son and Family Fraud. Someone linked Greg's Yelp profile. It tanked overnight. Their travel photos became meme fodder. "Been in your kid. Get a tan." They'd erase me digitally, and now the internet was restoring balance. Karen texted, "They're calling me nonstop." I replied, "You don't owe them explanations." She agreed. For once, their lies cowed and outrun truth. I didn't have to shout anymore. The world did it for me. A former neighbor emailed me. "They told everyone you were adopted out because you were violent." I blinked. That lie was new. It explained the pitying looks in old photos. I replied, "Thank you for telling me." Then I posted screenshots, anonymous but damning. People saw the layers of manipulation. It wasn't abandonment. It was a smear campaign. Margaret hugged me tighter that night. "Truth has roots," she said, and mine were growing stronger by the day. I got a call from a college admissions officer. "We saw your story and would love to offer you a full ride." I froze. "Are you serious? Your resilience is exactly what we value." I hung up and screamed. Ryan nearly dropped his sandwich. It wasn't just about spite anymore, it was about opportunity. My parents' absence had made room for something better. The lie they told closed one door. I'd kicked down another. Greg tried to flip the narrative. He wrote a blog post titled "A Father's Mistake." It reeked of image rehab. No apology, just excuses. He called me troubled and difficult to raise. I quoted one line and added, "If abandonment is parenting, then I'm glad I was too difficult." The comments section exploded. No one bought his act. Emma deactivated her accounts. Their pre-move had backfired. I didn't need revenge. I had receipts. That was enough. A podcast invited me to speak. "Tell your truth," the host said. I was nervous but agreed. Sitting in that studio Micon, I spoke calmly. They didn't leave out of need, they left out of want. I was inconvenient. The episode aired and went viral. Messages poured in. That was my story too. I wasn't just healing, I was helping others heal. My voice, once ignored, was now amplified. The silence they left behind became my stage. The ERS contacted me again. "Their audit is underway," the agent said. "We may need your testimony," so I agreed without hesitation. Margaret helped me prep, flipping through every document we'd kept. When the court notice arrived, I framed it not out of spite, but closure. They'd turned me into a statistic. Now I was turning them into a case file. There's power in being seen not as a victim, but as a witness. I was ready. The hearing was quiet. Laura didn't make eye contact. Greg fidgeted. I sat still. When asked if I'd been in contact during the years they filed as guardians, I answered no, I was in foster care. The judge nodded. Their lawyer looked pale. I wasn't angry, I was factual. My truth didn't need volume, just clarity. As we exited, Ryan whispered, "You won." I didn't smile. I breathed deep, steady. Not for them, for me. Weeks later, a restitution check arrived. Thousands, blood money again, but this time. Court ordered. I considered burning it. Margaret suggested something better. "Invest it in yourself," she said. So I started a fund, the Forgotten Scholarship for youth aging out of foster care. The first grant went to a girl studying law. I emailed her personally. "Your story matters." Giving away what they once withheld felt poetic. I didn't want their money, but I'd repurpose their debt into dignity. Emma showed up at a panel I spoke on afterward. She approached with tears and an envelope. "You deserve this," she whispered. Inside were letters, old ones I'd written as a kid. They'd never sent them. "I found them in a drawer," she said. My throat closed. I nodded but said nothing. Closure didn't need conversation. She turned and left. That moment didn't heal everything, but it acknowledged something. A bruise touched, not pressed. That was enough. My blog traffic spiked again, this time from parents. "Your words woke me up." One wrote. "Another, I apologized to my son today. I wasn't ready for that kind of ripple." Margaret smiled. "Pain becomes power when you pass it on." I started hosting writing workshops for foster youth. Not everyone's story could be told, but everyone deserved the tools. My pain wasn't a dead end, it was a path, and I was no longer walking alone. Greg and Laura vanished from public views. Their accounts were locked. Their travel photos deleted. I received one final email, blank, no subject, no body, just their names, a whisper of remorse maybe, but I didn't reply. Silence had become my boundary. Ryan said, "They lost access not just to your life but your voice." He was right. The story I told didn't need them anymore. They were the prologue. I was the author now and still writing. A publisher reached out, interested in a memoir. "Your voice fills a gap in this space," they said. I stared at the email for an hour. Then I replied. "Let's talk." The proposal became a manuscript. I wrote in bursts, between classes and speaking gigs. When it was done, I titled it "The Sun They Returned," not out of vengeance but transformation. I wasn't giving them credit. I was giving myself context. The world deserved the whole story. The book launch was surreal. Thomas wore a tie, first time in years. Margaret cried when I read the dedication aloud for those who stayed. Ryan fist bumped me before the queue. "You made it," he said. A woman in the crowd asked, "If they apologized, would you forgive them?" I paused. Forgiveness is irrelevant. Accountability matters more. The room hushed, then applauded. I hadn't come for sympathy. I came for truth. And I left with peace. A photo from the launch went viral, me hugging the Millers. Caption, "Not all family is blood." It trended for days. People shared their own foster stories. The publisher printed a second run. I didn't chase that moment, but I welcomed it. I'd become more than a survivor. I was a symbol. Laura and Greg had once tried to make me disappear. Instead, I became visible, not in spite of them but because I chose to rise anyway. Buying my first home wasn't about bricks, it was about peasants. No forwarding address, no hiding. The Millers helped me paint the walls. A Margaret made lemonade. I smiled, not because I'd won, but because I'd arrived. Finally, I belonged somewhere without earning it. This was my starting line, not their finish. On the wall above my desk, I framed a note, "You are not the aftermath." It reminded me every morning my story began when theirs ended. The world didn't need their names to know mine. I wasn't a reaction, I was a direction. And for once, it pointed forward. Their last attempt to cease and desist letter was ignored. I didn't need to respond. My truth stood taller than their denial. The Millers toasted with sparkling cider. Ryan cheered. I'd built a new name. A new legacy, one forged not by birth, but by choice. And it endured. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe to check out more stories on my channel.